Hey kids, Rio here. Welcome back to the channel. Today is Wednesday, so of course today is the next in my series of film reviews. Today we'll be doing my first episode of I Like It and I Don't Care If You Don't. Today we will be talking about Terry Gilliam's 1988 film, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, a true story. We've got the film to prove it.
And it was co-written and directed by Terry Gilliam. And it stars, John Neville, Eric Idle, Sarah Polley, Oliver Reed, Uma Thurman, Jonathan Pryce, Valentina Cortez. The score was done by Michael Kamen. This thing was actually nominated for many awards back in 1990. Won a few, actually, for production design, set design, costume and wig, cinematography. But look, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going into the minutia about this film, because we know who these people are. We know what they've done, we know what they do. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some other things that you may not know about this film.
From the director of Time Bandits and Brazil, a new movie.
So, The Baron, as I will refer to it from this point forward, The Baron is actually the third entry in a trilogy of films called the Trilogy of Imagination. Of course, the predecessors for that being Time Bandits in 1981 and Brazil in 1985. This is the third chapter of a singular story, believe it or not. I always thought these three films were related somehow. I can never quite figure it out, but I always figured these things were one story. Well, technically they are. According to Terry himself, and this will be a direct quote, is that it is about these all three films talk about the, quote, craziness of our awkwardly ordered society and the desire to escape it through whatever means possible. He continues that the one theme that connects all three films is the power of imagination. How we use our imagination to escape the absolute drudgery of life. Now, each film tells it from a different perspective. Time Bandits is through the eyes of a child. Brazil is through the age of a middle-aged man. And of course, the Baron being an elderly man, looking back. I always knew these films were connected. Feels so good to be right. I saw all three of these films in the theater when they came out. And when I saw The Baron, I saw it in this old school movie palace, you know, with the statues and reliefs and side stages, the velvet seats. It was extraordinary. The aesthetic of the theater matched the aesthetic of the film. It felt immersive. It was an amazing experience. It's kind of hard to describe, but I fell in love with this movie. And I think a lot of it had to do with the whole atmosphere in which I saw it. Interestingly enough, the reason I saw it was because I was familiar with Baron Munchausen. I was familiar with him from a film that came out in 1943, just called Munchausen. That was the stories of the Baron. Now, some of the quick-eyed of you that have seen the movie in the past, that is to say, seen the Baron, you would have probably noticed in some editions there's a little title card that makes a point of saying that this film is not a remake of this film from 1943. Well, there's a reason for that, actually. Interesting bit of trivia about the 1943 version, by the way, was a German production. And the author, the writer for the film, Erich Kästner, is not credited. There's no writer's credit in the opening of the film. And that is because Erich Kästner was actually a banned author during wartime Germany. And in fact, many of his books were burned in 1933. So the director, Joseph Goebbels, couldn't put his name in the credits.
The Sultan is going to cut off my head. And?
So I say I'm familiar with the stories of the Baron. Maybe you're not. You might also be thinking to yourself, who the heck's the Baron? Well, the Baron is actually a fictional German nobleman who was created by the German writer Rudolf Erich Raspe in his book from 1785 called, ready? Baron Munchausen's Narrative of His Marvelous Travels and Campaigns in Russia. Right? But it gets even better because, yes, the Baron, as we know him, is a fictional character, but he's actually based on a real person. Yeah, there was actually a real person. A Baron Hieronymus Karl Friedrich von Munchausen. That's a mouthful, huh? Yes, he was a real person. He fought for the Russian Empire during the Russian-Turkish War, 1735 to 1739. Was apparently a hero. Now, upon his return, he became kind of a minor celebrity in aristocratic circles for his outrageous tales. You see where this is going, right? Yeah. When he retired in 1760, he actually sort of opened up his home as a salon. Visiting travelers and noblemen would come to see him, just to have drinks and dinner with him, to listen to these tales. How much people believed him, I don't know. But he definitely developed a reputation for being imaginative in his tales. And people flocked to hear him tell them.
He was full of it.
Now, in fictional depictions of the Baron is very matter-of-fact. He tells the stories of the most absurd. But just completely objectively, like, yeah, what? Though, interestingly enough, if you present him with a tale of the absurd, because he didn't see it with his own eyes, he doesn't believe you. Right? He's very straightforward, and no matter how exaggerated the story is, he wraps it in historical places and historical fact. That makes it just believable enough that you really don't know if he's telling you the truth or not. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. You don't know, so you don't question him. You just smile and sip your cognac and listen to the story. If nothing else, you are entertained. So all the early illustrations of the Baron show you a very fit and trim young man. You know, a brave soldier, the image of the hero. However, in 1792, in a sequel to the original book, Rasp's illustrations change. Now the illustration shows an old and tired soldier, a nobleman of dignity who's seen some stuff. That actually does become pretty much the standard image of the Baron for over 70 years. Everyone kind of thinks of him as an old man. Interestingly enough, in Terry Gilliam's version, the Baron, as he tells his tales, goes back and forth between being a young man and an older man. And I wonder sometimes if that's the metaphor, you know, where the older man looking back and remembering the young man, if there's a metaphor there in how he sees himself in the tale. I'm sure there's probably something to that. Anybody knows Terry Gilliam? Somebody ask him. Thanks.
I'm Baron Munchausen. That sounds nasty. Is it contagious?
Now, a lot of you probably know the word Munchausen. You've heard it before. You're familiar, of course, with a condition called Munchausen by proxy. And we all know what that is. It turns out there were many philosophical dilemmas and medical conditions and even mathematical problems that are all named after the fictional Baron. Kind of cool, right? I just found out about this one today. It's called the Munchausen trilemma. This was coined in 1968 by Hans Albert. And what the Munchausen trilemma is when you're telling when you're trying to learn something and it's based on a premise, which is based on a premise, which is based on a premise. So the further you go, you just end up circular and right back where you started. It just becomes nonsensical because there's just nowhere to go, right? This is illustrated in a couple of the stories about the Baron. One of which, of course, is when he rescues himself from a swamp by pulling himself up off the ground by his own hair. Also, his escape from the moon, in which he puts the rope and then he cuts the top off the rope and then ties it to the bottom of the rope and keeps going. Yes, that is the Munchausen trilemma. Both of these events do take place in Terry Gilliam's film. Most of the things that we see in the film are all based on claims of the fictional Baron from all of his various incarnations.
Have you any famous last words? Not yet. Not yet? Is that famous?
You know, it's interesting that there have been so many versions of the fictional Baron over the years. Not just these original books. There have been many books by other authors. There have been radio plays. There have been movies. There have been comic books. Children's books. There was even, as recently as 2012, was a 2-part miniseries that aired on German television, I believe, called Baron and the Cannonball. Which, again, the Cannonball is one of the sort of standard stories, not only in Terry Gilliam's film, but is consistent throughout all the iterations of the Baron as one of the tales that he tells. You know, even as I say that the tales of the Baron are not as popular in the English-speaking world as they once were. Still very popular in continental Europe. But I actually just recently attended a theatrical production trying to bring back the stories of the Baron. And it was amazing. It's a show called An Evening with the Baron that was written by and stars Lance Bankert. And it is an intimate, immersive experience recreating the events of the mid-1700s, in which the real Baron Munchausen would host nobles and travelers and regale them with his tales of daring do. It was an amazing experience. It was absolutely extraordinary. If this show comes anywhere in your area, even if you are not particularly familiar with the stories of the Baron, go to the play. Just trust me on this one. I was very happy to see someone bringing the stories back. And it was wonderful to have that almost a living history kind of, sort of, that is how you learn about the Baron, is by meeting the Baron. So.
Now you come back in and expect me to follow you to the ends of the earth? Yes. All right.
Getting back to Terry Gilliam's version of the Baron, I find it to be very faithful to the kind of stories that the Baron is known for. I think he did a wonderful job of that, and knowing now that this is the third part of a trilogy of imagination, my next objective actually is I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch all three films again, and I'm going to watch them in order. I think there's only one character, one actor that actually appears in all three films, so I'm going to look for that. But I want to see all three of them in order and actually see that trilogy and feel it, right? Because the imagination of a child is different from the imagination of middle age, which is different from the imagination of old age. Leave it to Terry Gilliam to point out the absolute absurdity of life. He's not wrong, you guys. He's not wrong. I have a very personal attachment to this film. Not just from my beautiful experience of having seen it in this glorious movie palace back when it was first released. I'm one of the few, I think, that was lucky to see it that way. Apparently, there were very limited prints that were released in the U.S. So I was very lucky to get to see it that way. But also, this film means a lot to me because of a friend that I showed it to. She's no longer with us, but it's an enduring memory of us watching that film. Like, we got it on VHS when it came out on home video, and we watched it again and again and again and again. To this day, I can recite that whole movie from beginning to end. So, this one's for you, Lori. Okay, kids. Well, I guess that's it for this week. You gotta join me next week, you guys. I've got a brand new film that I'm gonna be reviewing for next week's edition, and I am super excited to check this film out. Very super excited. I'm not gonna tell you anything. I don't want to give any spoilers. You're just gonna have to join me and see what film it is, but I know I'm gonna dig it, and I have a really strong feeling y'all are gonna dig it too. So if you look over here, there's a subscribe button someplace. You go ahead and hit that button, and you'll get notifications of when my next reviews go up. I've got a number of new ones coming up, so it's not always gonna be this, but this will be a continuing series of I like it, and I don't care if you don't. So you can always join me for those too. Maybe you'll learn something new about something you didn't like before. Or learn something you haven't seen before. I'm here to serve. Alright, you guys. It's been fun. I'll see you next week. Was a book called Baron Munchausen's Narrative of the Marvelous Travels and Campaigns in Russia. By Fallout Boy. Sorry. One more time. Keep it as an outtake.